The water was coming in and it was about to literally sweep us out to the ocean. My buddy Steve is able to jump on the log. I was able to jump on
Oh,
the log. And I think a lot of people that don't do photography don't get it, or just don't understand, like, oh, why do you want to get up so early? Why is it so important to see a sunset? And it's like, man, that's part of the addiction.
hello everyone. My guest today is Bret. Hey Bret, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Great. Just give us an introduction about yourself and your photography for those watching.
My name is Bret Blakely, based out of Buffalo, New York. Been doing photography seriously for about 6 years. Just a super passionate hobby. Focus on landscape, wildlife. I think I just love the fact that it takes you across the world. Really gets you out in nature. Just kind of my happy spot. And it's a great creative outlet too. Some of my favorite memories are definitely photography trips and interactions with wildlife and sunrises. And I think it's one of the great gifts. It kind of teaches you to notice all the beauty around you.
Before we get to your first photo, I have a couple questions here up front. Are you single, taken? Is complicated? What's your status for those people
No,
wondering
no,
out
man.
there?
I'm married. I celebrated 2 years on July 2nd this past summer.
Congratulations. Did you go anywhere
Actually,
special?
we were actually in Spain. If you go down my Instagram, several of them were from my trip to Spain. We did 10 days. We were in wine country for a few nights with 6 other couples, and all the couples kind of split off, and we went to Mallorca.
Wow, that sounds like a reality TV show.
It wasn't bad. It was pretty amazing. What's funny is the first big trip that we ever took together as a couple when we were dating was to Rwanda in Africa, because she had a sister and a husband who were both in the Peace Corps and lived in Rwanda. I had always liked pictures and just keeping memories, but I'd never actually learned how to use a camera or gotten a high quality camera or anything like that. It was the trip to Rwanda when we did our safari. I got home from there and literally said, I want to learn photography. That
Oh,
was the
wow.
catalyst for it. I literally spent 3 months watching YouTube tutorials and then joined a buddy of mine on a trip to Yosemite because he had started really getting into photography about 2 years earlier. He was kind of teaching me along the way. So I bought my first Sony and started going down the rabbit hole of ISO and aperture and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, first I got to kind of hand it to my wife. It was that trip.
Well, it's good you had a mentor to help you start out. I pretty much taught myself. It probably took me 8 months to figure out ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all that
Yep.
stuff. It sounds like you had a little faster start there at the beginning.
It's still a learning process. I'm still watching. I try and watch at least one tutorial every single day. I think that's part of the fun of it, just constantly learning and getting better and learning new techniques that you can incorporate, which is a lot of fun.
Well, judging by your photos, you're a master now. Let's get to the photo showcase. We'll look at
All
your
right.
first picture here. 1 second. All right, just tell us about this picture and why you chose to feature it.
This was my second trip to Grand Tetons last fall. No, 2 falls ago. I apologize. 2 falls ago. I don't know if you've ever been to Grand Tetons, but the flight in is unreal because the mountains are all along your right hand side as you're landing, and you can see pretty much the whole park as you're coming in. I remember my buddy and I looking at each other like, oh my god, it's actually peak. It's pretty much peak right now, which is great. We were super pumped about the whole trip. Had a lot of cool experiences, but that night was one of those where we were looking for bison. We had heard there were a bunch out in this open field. Got there at the right time, and it ended up being one of my favorite shots ever. I think because it just felt like such an epitome of, Wyoming. The golden light,
Yeah.
which kind of matched the autumn tones. You had the beautiful, majestic peaks in the background, but I love how the light was just kind of spotlighting them. Now there was probably about 100 bison. If you had turned 180 degrees, there were a ton in the other direction, which was cool, but that wasn't really a cool shot. What I loved was just these two kind of standing alone, perfectly silhouetted, with this gorgeous golden light. It's just a really special moment. Josh Allen, who's our Buffalo Bills QB, is a buddy of mine and an investor
Okay.
in my company, and he went to Wyoming for college to play college football. I actually sent him a 3x4 foot print of this, and he's got it hanging in his house, which is pretty awesome. A metal print.
Wow. That's why he's doing so good this
Yeah.
year.
Well, and that's the other thing. It's our Buffalo Bills logo. It's Wyoming. It's the Buffalo. So pretty cool.
Did he hook you up some season tickets as well?
No, yeah, he's given me plenty of signed stuff, that's for sure, and I get to golf with him every once in a while.
Who's the better golfer? I'm
Oh,
curious.
he is really good.
Yeah, it's the Bills Mafia. This what we gonna do. This our season. It's our time.
He's good at everything he does.
There you go. Well, maybe you beat him in photography still.
Yeah, you know what? I think I have him on that. So that's the one thing I can say that I'm better at Josh Allen than.
Let me stop sharing real fast. Before we look at some of your next pictures, you mentioned golfing. Do you have any other hobbies outside of photography that you enjoy?
I've always been into sports and physical fitness. I played basketball and hockey growing up and soccer. But I own a golf ball company. My buddy and I started that 13 years ago. It's called Encore Golf. That's actually how I met Josh. His agent reached out early on in his career and said, "Hey, Josh is obsessed with golf. You're in Buffalo. Would love to meet you guys." And next, he's an investor and buddy and everything, which is great. I really enjoy any kind of competition. I've always just really been into sports, and the music scene's great in Buffalo. A lot of breweries and stuff. So my wife and I are always going. We have couple friends that are in a band that's always performing. Your outside interests kind of change when you get married and you get older. I'm 43 now, but I think we have a pretty fun life. It's nothing better than a little music and a brewery on a Saturday.
What kind of music does the band play? What genre? I'm just curious.
They do like Americana, and they got their own albums and stuff like that. But they also love doing Tom Petty covers every once in a while. It's just fun because they're a married couple that Ashley is my wife's best friend. From the minute I started dating her, we would go to these shows of theirs on the weekends, and now their music is basically the soundtrack to our relationship. I love going to see their shows because it just reminds me of our relationship and everything. They actually wrote a song for our wedding, which was beautiful. It was nice.
Would you consider yourself a semi-pro or amateur or professional? You said it's not your full-time career, right? Since you have the golf ball company.
I'm a passionate amateur. I mean, I don't know what you would call it. I sell prints, on my website. Yeah. I would love for that to be my full-time profession at some point. Obviously, I want Encore to succeed for another 10, 20 years as well, but I have been trying to start to put together like a media kit. I'm doing with my photo buddies, a fall road trip in Quebec in early October, and working with 2 separate Airbnbs in the mountains there, where I'm doing pictures in exchange for stays and stuff. I'd like to start monetizing a little bit more. I was asked to host a photography workshop. I think there's an avenue for it to be more of a professional or at least money-making thing. That would be great if I was able to pay for some of my expensive gear with some of these projects, but I truly just love the hiking, love being out there in nature. Let's say you go to a sunrise tomorrow morning. Even if there's 500 other people watching that same sunrise, you're still less than 0.0000001% of any person on planet Earth that was there at that time, at that moment for that sunrise. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about photography in itself, is that not only are you getting up earlier than most people or staying out later or paying attention to the sunset, but you're also capturing it then and editing it and doing all that, where there's this singular moment that you've been able to capture and make completely unique to yourself.
A lot of times photographers will notice small details that other people don't notice just looking at a scene or a landscape. We'll notice a foreground object, or we'll notice light changing. You know what I mean? There's just small details that you start to pick up as a photographer.
Yep, without a doubt. Yeah.
Next photo showcase here. 1 second. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep. So
all right.
I picked that one. I told you at my first big trip that was kind of the catalyst for me wanting to learn photography. was the Rwanda trip, and the trip that my buddy who was already into photography said he was taking was Yosemite that November. So this is literally one of that might be like my 10th shot that I took. We got there,
Really?
we got to Yosemite just in time for a sunset. Went back to the lodge, and then the next morning went to Yosemite Valley, where it was moodier than hell, which I loved. This is like literally one of the first shots I ever took on my first photography dedicated trip ever. It's one of my favorites too, because Yosemite Valley view has got to be one of the greatest views on all of Earth. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You get such interesting weather conditions and atmospheric conditions because of the difference in temperature from the morning to the evening, the seasonality of it all. I love it. You got the three brothers and the waterfall in the background and that fog hanging low.
This photo definitely gives me a Land Before Time kind of feeling. Like I could just imagine dinosaurs sticking their heads up out of the forest there in this picture.
Which was happening at some point, which is crazy.
I noticed a lot of your photos on Instagram kind of have a very special processing you do. I don't know if it's like a filter or something, but they do have that kind of back then type look. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to.
When I started off, I shot very moody. A lot of like blue color tone, colder tones, muted. I couldn't tell you why. It was just kind of the style I was into at that point. And now and I think I was trying to make a lot of them match too. A lot of them had the same color tones. I never used a filter, but I was just using a lot of the same kind of temperatures and white balance and color grading and things like that. I got to a point where, some artists and photographers, all their work has a pretty much identical color palette, and it works. I mean, there's some massive, photographers that you see that have just stunning work, and their whole grid looks extremely cohesive with the color palette, and they create a preset, and then everything's going to kind of have a similar feel. After doing something, feeling like I was changing certain photos and scenes to something that they weren't, I felt like I was doing them a disservice, because I was trying to make maybe a very warm scene still have like a moodier, darker feel to it. So I kind of just switched. It was just kind of a personal preference and tasting that I evolved out of, where then I was like, I want to pay homage to the most beautiful elements of that scene for every single shot. And a lot of my work now is more colorful and just kind of accentuating everything that I saw, rather than trying to make it all fit like a certain aesthetic to match, which I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just my preference now. I might get back to another point where I'm like, no, I want it all to look the same again. But that's not where I'm at right now.
We all go through phases. I went through a selective color phase where I was like trying to make every picture look cool with selective color. Yeah. Then there's this one time where I saw like a 3D phase where I know how to edit to make it look like the picture jumps out at you. We all go through those different phases as photographers, just trying out cool stuff that we see, get inspired by. So that's, I think that's.
Yep. It's fun too, because then when you do kind of evolve into a different phase, you are inspired to learn again, because you're like, all right, well, now I want to know how to do this. Anything that you're going to have passion for is going to be fueled by the desire to learn. It's always good when we're curious.
Before we take a look at your next picture, do you have a piece of photography advice that you've received from your mentor or just reading through the YouTube channels or anything like that you can think of?
I mean, just constantly working at your craft and constantly learning. You might know ISO and the exposure triangle. You might know all that like the back of your hand. You can still learn something new about it. I think that really is the most important thing, because there was a while then where I felt like I knew everything I needed to take the photos that I wanted. Like I kind of had like a 6 month phase where I just wasn't taking a lot of photographs, and it was very much in parallel with when I stopped trying to continue to learn more. I think just like constantly doing that is great. It's a great way to stay inspired
Yeah.
because there are so many different techniques and styles, and you just never know what it'll lend itself to. Just constantly learning in any capacity, I think, is really great.
All right, let's take a look at another photo then. Not a landscape, surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, this was down in Miami. I love symmetry, and it looked like something out of the Matrix. They were just so perfectly in sync, but almost seemed fake. It was just most beautiful sunset and sky that night. As you can see, it was super pink. You had enough clouds that you got some really beautiful color, but it wasn't so cloudy that you didn't get the light and the brightness kind of coming through and poking in. In Miami, what do you think of when you think of Miami as far as colors? You think of teal, you think of hot pink. It was very much a Miami vibe that night. It was one of those shots where I probably took 50, I was doing rapid fire,
Yeah.
and I think this was like one of three that was actually sharp. I wasn't ready. I wasn't expecting it. I was set up on my tripod for a long exposure shot, water coming up against the rocks and everything, and then I saw these birds up in the air. I was like trying to get it off the tripod, switch lenses, and get my settings right and everything. I was just like rapid firing real quick, and luckily was able to get one. This is one of the photos we have printed up in our house.
At first, I thought that pink was Photoshop or processing or something, but that was the natural color you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
That is really nice.
Beautiful.
A couple more questions here for you. How do you feel about AI in photography? The big buzzword of the last couple of years. Have you thought about that at all?
Really fun. Yeah, really funny. Buddy Steve, who's the co-founder of the golf ball company with me, he sent me an article this morning about AI and photography. It was like, this could be really cool how they're turning photography into these crazy pieces of cool looking artwork using AI. He thought it was interesting and sent it to me. Wrote him back. So really funny that you're asking this.
Yeah.
I think it produces some really amazing stuff. Like it's cool to look at. But for me, a huge part of it is the process of going out and taking the photos. I like the process of taking the photo and any kind of editing, I guess you could call in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're introducing maybe more vibrancy, or you're introducing different colors or a vignette or whatever. In a sense, it's kind of part of digital photography anyway. I don't know. To me, it's like a shortcut. I don't want to just prompt something and be like, hey, make this really cool. Because I know how much time and money and everything I'm putting into taking a photo. Also, I don't judge anyone for doing it either, because they might have a totally different purpose for wanting to use it. My goals as a photographer are just my goals. If somebody likes to go and take a photo and then seeing how amazing they can make it look via AI, good for them. They should do it. I don't really have any position on it as far as whether someone should or shouldn't. The only thing I will say is, if it's being used, and I know Instagram tries to make sure that you're stating if you put AI into it,
right.
But I can't stand when I've seen people, especially when it first started coming out, try and pass off photos that were clearly AI, and I'm like, come on, they're blowing up and everything. I'm like, dude, fake.
Let's take a look at your next picture here. The Mystery Man. Tell us about this one.
This was in Monument Valley in Utah. We did a road trip, started around Zion and drove all the way up to Salt Lake. I was just blown away. First off, I had never been to Utah, and now all I can think about is going back. But every part of Utah that we went through was just absolutely incredible. And we did a morning Monument Valley sunrise tour, and I just like this one because I love natural frames. I love finding frames in nature. I think it adds depth. I think it's just kind of a cool little peekaboo moment, like you got a secret. like you weren't meant to see this or something like that. I just think frames can add a lot. I don't even need to use a vignette because I got a natural one here with this bush, this tree that I was shooting through. What's funny is that my buddy was just out there looking and had no idea I was taking a photo of him. And I just loved how you could see these gargantuan structures, rock formations in the distance. You're literally looking at my buddy Steve just kind of standing out there in utter awe of everything. And another piece of advice is like go the opposite direction that everyone else is when setting up for a photo. If everybody is crowding around a certain shot, it's probably because it's a really nice composition, but that also means that everyone's going to have that shot. So it's always good to give yourself enough time to like look around and see if there's a different way to see the same thing that everybody else is seeing. And in this case, it's pretty deserty out here, but there was this one tree over there and the right part of the tree and branches that had enough of an opening for me to shoot through and still caught everything in the back. Just thought it turned out really cool. I like it.
So you didn't pay him $5 to stand there for you? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I didn't. Nope.
A lot of photographers I've interviewed on this podcast, a lot of photographers I've interviewed use their friends as props in their photos. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Oh, we're doing our Quebec trip soon, and we've already talked about different things, especially because we're providing content for the Airbnb. So not only for the shots, but we're like, oh man, we should bring a guitar, we should bring headlamps, we got to bring the lanterns and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, definitely using people as props is, I think, a fun way to enhance photos. A subject can make a photo really dynamic.
Speaking of framing shots, I have a special surprise for you. I have not done this in any other of my podcast interviews. I'm going to surprise you with a picture of mine. I'd love to hear your thoughts or critique on it. Just throw a curveball. Maybe I'll keep doing it in future interviews. So we'll see.
Love it.
Yeah. Let me share. There you go. There's a frame for you.
Oh, cool. Is that Australia?
Yeah, that's Sydney. That's the Opera House.
Wow. So tell us the story. Yeah. Now I'm putting you on the spot.
My goal was to shoot the Opera House at sunset. I got there pretty early to get set up. I didn't know where the best spot was, where the best location is. So I was bored. I had like an hour and a half sitting there waiting to shoot the sunset. I wanted the reflections on the waters and stuff like that. Yeah. Then I thought, oh, wow, what's a different perspective that I can do that you don't see too often? That's where I saw this little peak of sky between the branches there. And I was like, oh, maybe I can get like a more like nature type shot. The stories for this one.
I love it. What I like is the angle. If you look at all the different compositional guidelines for photography, this absolutely fits in it. The branches are drawing the eye to the Opera House. Or was it Opry House? What is it?
Opera House, I think.
Opera House. It is Opera. I didn't know if it's Opera. They're almost like tilting up, which is kind of like the same curvature of the Opera House as well. You almost have two subjects. It's cool with the leading lines and compositionally, it's just super unique. I've definitely not seen that captured like that, so that's really cool.
Appreciate it. All right. One more thought-provoking question for you. What do you want to happen to your photos when you die, when you're no longer here? Have you ever thought about that? All these photos that you've taken so far.
I hope they fill the homes of family and friends. I'm actually part of a cool project. Shy Children's Hospital was built. It's pretty new, but it's one of the top children's hospitals in the country now. It's absolutely stunning. They asked me, I'm donating 24 photos it's part of their healing arts program. Patients that are coming in to deal with life-threatening diseases and life-saving treatment and everything. It can be a very sterile environment in a hospital and intimidating and sad. And scary and empty. Their healing arts program is to decorate the halls with artwork and photography to make people stay a little bit brighter. So I'm really excited about that. Which I think 24 photos they chose are getting printed up and put in there. I think it's such a great idea on their part to utilize, local artists, be my photography, but there are other artists that have donated, uplifting pieces of work of their own as well. And they say it makes a big difference. I did that for the maternity ward in the hospital like 5 years ago. And it's
Nice.
crazy how many people that I ran into, like friends who gave birth there, and I'd get a text, or next time I'd see them, they'd be like, "We saw your photos," or your photo was hanging right outside our room. That is wild. I think that would be a cool way for the photography to, but I
Yeah,
definitely want to
sure.
do a coffee table book or calendar and everything. I've been sleeping on that. I gotta get that done.
If people still have coffee tables in the future, who
Yeah,
knows?
exactly.
All right, let's share some more of your photos here. You got plenty. All right, we haven't shown this one yet.
Yep. Death Valley, Mesquite Sand Dunes, probably one of the most fun places to photograph because it's just a compositional lover's dream. I mean, it is endless lines and, you know, rimming light and, shadows, and it's always changing too. I mean, because of the wind. So the dunes are changing constantly. The sheer amount of compositions that you can seek out and capture in one single shoot there. You spend an hour there and you'll have 50 photos. It's just one of my favorites. I don't know who that person was. I was there all alone out Death Valley, and it's so massive. So you feel like you're alone out there, but off in the distance, you'd usually see like somebody way off. And they're exhausting. I don't know if you've ever, done a photo, gone to sand dunes and climbed them and everything. It is absolutely exhausting getting up and down those things. But this one was just super cool. I was so pumped of where this guy decided to set up for his own shot, because I just loved how like these zigzagging lines, and then you kind of got the three dunes that are coming to a tip from the middle left, then more center, and then the highest one with that light hitting it. I've got a ton of shots from there. Some of my most some of my favorite compositions that I've ever done. And that was definitely a huge uh, help from nature, just providing such an epic landscape. One of my favorites for
the
sure.
the person gives it a sense of scale too, right? You don't really
Yep,
appreciate how big these dunes are until you see that small little guy or woman standing there.
yep,
I think that's
yep.
a good inclusion in the photo.
I remember when I saw the person, I felt like I was almost looking at myself because I was doing the exact same thing. I was setting up for a shot, looking out in the same direction. I remember thinking, I wonder if there's somebody a quarter mile behind me taking a photo as well of me. Because this
Maybe.
person probably had no idea that I was taking a picture of them, or that they're the subject of one of my photos or whatever. But yeah, just a really special experience. It's an amazing place.
Well, we've seen all these perfect shots. Let's go to a missed shot and see that he's not perfect after all here.
Definitely not. Throw away more than you keep. That's for sure.
All right, tell us about why you chose this as a missed shot.
I was just super bummed because it was such a cool shot. The hawk was super far away. I had to crop in a ton. I actually had no idea what it was eating when I took the photograph. I had no idea. I was actually really sad when I pulled it up on my computer. I'm like, oh my God, it's a baby turtle, that poor thing. Like, I felt terrible. The thing about wildlife is, if it's not tack sharp, to me, it's a miss. I love the shot itself, and I've got a really cool edit of it, where I just kind of introduced a little bit more blue and purple into the sky. Nothing crazy, just a touch. I've been on the fence. I've almost posted it a bunch of times, but what bothers me is when I zoom into that eye, it's not tack sharp. I want to see a reflection. I'm too much of a perfectionist or something to post it. Maybe I'll not care one day. I mean, I think it's still a nice shot, but I just wish it was a little bit clearer.
Before we share the next photo, do you have a dream shot in your mind that you'd like to achieve that you haven't achieved yet?
Yeah, I'll be achieving it in April. I'm going to Madeira. It'll probably be a drone shot, but I want to get me on the edge of a cliff with above the clouds, because they're the Pico de Ruivo hike or whatever is you're pretty much guaranteed to be above the clouds every sunrise, and it is just some of the most epic looking landscape with the clouds below you and the mountain peaks and everything, and that's kind of the next dream shot that I'm focused on. But definitely wildlife too. I mean, I would love to. I haven't been to Alaska yet. I'm really itching to do grizzly bears in Alaska and also do polar bears in Manitoba and Churchill. Those are two that I've been dying to do from a wildlife standpoint as well.
What country is that first city that you mentioned for the cloud shot? What country is? You said Madeira?
It's Madeira in Portugal.
Portugal, okay.
Yep.
I don't know if everybody knows where that is exactly.
Yeah, it's an island. It's an island off Portugal.
All right, we're gonna look at a photo for critique that you sent me. Hold on one second. All right, first give me some background before I give you any critique on this shot.
So this was also in the Grand Tetons. This was another example of shooting something different. We were just driving down the road, and there was this crow in that tree, and it was just super pretty. It was like really hot, bright light. You know, we had been up for sunrise, but at this point it's like 9:30, so now the light was starting to get pretty intense. I'd already gotten a crow shot, or sorry, not crow, raven, a raven shot the day before. I was standing up and just zooming in on it super tight, and I was like, all right, so I don't need an up close detailed shot. The snowbank was about 4 feet high. That darker part on the left and the bottom of the photo, and then up to the right, that's actually the snowbank. This is really cool because with a snowbank covering it, you don't see any of the ground that the tree is actually growing out of. Was hoping that the putting in the snowbank would provide something cool, but had no idea that it was literally going to look like it was a tree growing out of the clouds. So again, just another example of kind of trying to find a different way to shoot something.
For me, the snowbank or the smudges on the side and the bottom are a bit distracting. They take your eye away from the subject a bit. I feel like there's just a little bit, maybe too much at the top. Maybe cut off like 3/4 of the top.
Sure.
But just still leave a little sky there.
Yeah.
I don't know how this would look in like black and white or infrared, like super infrared or super black and white. That make it look even more interesting. Yeah. I don't know if you played around with that at all.
I didn't try black and white. You're right, though. It is almost monochrome already, naturally. Just because it was literally all white, just it's bright snow and dark branches and stuff. So, yeah, it might be interesting to go full black and white.
Like you said, there's just something that got missed a little bit or just doesn't fully bring it into that stellar range versus a decent shot.
Yeah.
Like your other ones. Okay. Let me stop sharing. So I think we only have couple more questions before we wrap things up here. Do you have any crazy or wild stories or experiences for any of your travels or adventures that you haven't shared yet that you can think of?
I think one of the funniest, but is only funny because he survived. Our buddy Adam, Steve and Adam are two friends, photographers that I go on pretty much all my photo trips with. We were out in Olympic National Park and had gone to I can't remember. I think it was Beach 3 in Olympic for a sunrise one morning. If you've ever been out to Olympic, the water can, I mean, kind of like Iceland, where the waves can go from coming 20 feet on the shore to 150 feet on the shore.
Oh, wow.
It's very unpredictable. We're hiking along this beach and we're trying to get down, and we're noticing that the water is coming in just a little bit and then it's coming in a lot. We get our shots and then we're starting to hike back and it's getting higher and higher. It's coming in more and more. And there's about 100 feet or so that we needed to get back off the beach safely. We're like, all right, well, let's kind of time this thing and try and essentially run across the beach.
Oh, wow.
To get to the safe part before the water comes in. Otherwise, our feet are going to be absolutely soaked. We start running and we get to the tail end, but there's like a tree trunk that was, I mean, it was probably 15 feet around. It was huge. The water was coming in and it was about to literally sweep us out to the ocean. My buddy Steve is able to jump on the log. I was able to jump on the log. Remember, we have all our camera gear on too, which is super heavy. Well, my buddy Adam noticed just a tad bit late, and you know what they say, white men can't jump, and he definitely could not jump. He basically has his arms hanging over the log. The water came up to his chest, and literally as it was going back out to sea, he's hanging on, and his whole body went horizontal. He yells out the most guttural scream, trying to hang on
Oh,
for
my
dear life.
God.
Honestly, one of the funniest things I've ever seen, because he ended up being okay, and he literally almost got dragged out to sea. It looked like he had gone in the ocean with all his clothes on. It wasn't just his boots. The water literally came up to his chest and almost took him away. But yeah, things like that happen every once in a while.
Was this gear destroyed?
No, because it was on his backpack. His body went horizontal. It literally lifted him up, so his backpack was on top of his back, which was above the water, but everything else it was rushing down his pants and everything. I mean, I've never seen a body go completely horizontal like that from water pulling it back out. It was insane. But I feel like every trip we have something that happens that we end up just crying, laughing for the remainder of the trip, and then every time we bring it up, it's like part of the stories. That's why my wife is always scared that I'm, going to get hurt or something, because she'll see pictures of me on a cliff or this or that, and she's like, "You're making me nervous."
Well, he sounds like you got very lucky.
Yep. Part of the adventure.
So what is the?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead. What is the best way to? What is the best way to contact you? Do you prefer Instagram, a website? What do you prefer? People contact you.
Yeah, Instagram's perfect. I'm there a lot, and I try and post quite frequently. And I'm responsive. I reach out to photographers all the time. I've met up with photographers, through Instagram, and I mean, that winter trip to the Tetons I was just mentioning, a buddy, we met this guy, Alex. I knew him through Instagram. We had just been following each other's photography, and I saw where he was based, and I'm like, hey, I'm coming to Wyoming, in February. And
yeah,
I was like, how far are you? And he's like, well, I'm 2 hours away, Wyoming. But he goes, I will definitely come and meet you. He came and met us and had an absolute blast. I think as you get older, like, your circle shrinks and you start just surrounding yourself with people that have like-minded interests. A lot of people that don't do photography don't get it, or just don't understand, like, oh, why do you want to get up so early? Why is it so important to see a sunset? And it's like, man, that's part of the addiction. Once you start seeing things that a lot of people don't see and capturing it and everything, you become addicted to wanting to see the next greatest sunset and wanting to see a fox and all that kind of stuff. That's been one of the coolest things I think about photography too, is just making friends from all over the world that I'm definitely going to make sure I reach out to people that I know that are in Portugal and say, hey, want to meet up? Come shoot for a day or whatever. It's just a great way to meet people that have the same kind of passion.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, but there's a good balance to be had, especially if you're with your wife or kids and stuff. This day for photography, this day for family time or romantic dinner. We got to learn sometimes not to be behind the lens 100% every single day, every single night.
100%. That's why my wife always loves the photos that I get from our trips, but it's always, she knows, or I know, it's not a photo trip. This is a me and her trip. If I get a few shots from our travels together, it's great, but certainly not the focus of it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's great to see your images and hear your stories. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nathan. I appreciate it, man. It was a great talk.
All right. I'll see you on Instagram. Have a good
All right,
night.
sounds good, Nathan. Take care.
Right. Bye.